Solidarity Committee on the Americas. And before we get going here, I just want to tell you, and Royal will say it also, Royal Mike, the co-MC, who is home for
recording in progress.
The only reason anybody would be at home for this, so you could guess, keeping us safe. On the table, there's a silent auction of stuff that Linden, the other presenter besides Aisha, brought back from Cuba from this trip. And the proceeds are all going to go directly to Cuba. So pay with cash, or we have a website you can give to, and I'll give you that. Actually, we should put that on the table. And you gotta be careful if you put it online to not say Cuba. Do not say Cuba, or everybody will get in trouble. So we don't want that.
No photos.
I think photos are fine. Fine. No, it's just the Cuba going out into the ether is not good. We'll just pass cards around for people to write their questions, if you don't mind, and then we'll ask those. We'll have the two presenters, and then pass the bucket as we always do. And part of that, let's say at least $1 a person will go to Mayday Books. Thank you, Mayday Books, for being. Mayday is not usually open on Sunday, but they made special dispensation for us. So thank you, Mayday Books. And the rest will go straight to Cuba. Again, don't say to the place that shall not be named. We'll say.
And it's going to go directly, Sarah, to medical providers in Cuba through building relations with Cuban labor. I'll be delivering.
That's right.
Global health.
Sorry,
Yeah.
something separate.
Okay, how many of you have been to Cuba? Whoa. How many have tickets to go to Cuba right now? And that's where the cash is going to go, with Rebecca to Cuba for humanitarian aid. So just a quick thing about Wham. Wham is, can you believe this, 44 years old? Yeah. And early on, Lucia, I think, was involved. The Wham was very involved in the wars in Central America. A lot of people went down and did actions and education here. So we started out both with nuclear stuff and also the wars in the U.S. wars in Central America. Then the conditions changed some, and it wasn't until 2019 that we came back to Central America, and that was when Venezuela was in the crosshairs, really in the crosshairs. There have been a couple assassinated, and it's only gotten worse, obviously. And there have been pink tides, and the pink tides have been reversed, and there have been good elections like in Colombia and Mexico, and bad elections like in Argentina and El Salvador. So it's in constant flux, thanks primarily to the Monroe Doctrine and U.S. imperialism, right? So that's what SCOTA is, an action-oriented, focusing on challenging U.S. hegemonic policies in the region and supporting the right of self-determination for all. So, with that, I want to give it over to Arroyo Garcia-Torres, who is up on the TV, and he's the co-MC, and he's going to take it from here.
Hello, everyone. And again, just to plug it, we're fundraising to buy more medical supplies and to send any of the cash donations that we receive over with Rebecca, who will be heading over to Cuba. We have a silent auction from the souvenirs that Linden brought back from Cuba. We accept cash donations. We have an address for check donations as well if you would like to mail it instead. And we have a couple links for online campaigns for people interested in donating directly to other campaigns as well. Anything helps. Like Sarah said, do not write Cuba in the memo, but do let us know if you donated before the end of this event so we can calculate it and calculate our impact. And just as a reminder, if you can write down your questions on the little note cards and hold your questions until after both the speakers have finished their presentations. And yeah, I would just like to introduce our first speaker. We have the great honor of having councilmember Aisha here with us. Aisha Chughtai is the Minneapolis City Council member for Ward 10. She is the child of immigrants, a former union organizer, Muslim American, and a socialist community organizer who works to stay informed and involved in the various struggles in her community. She is committed to protecting and supporting immigrants, the LGBTQ community, the environment, our unhoused neighbors, workers' rights, public transportation, housing, and abortion. So give it up for Aisha.
Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Chughtai. My pronouns are she, her, and I represent the 10th Ward on the Minneapolis City Council, which includes South Minneapolis, Uptown, and a little bit of Southwest Minneapolis. This is my 5th year on the City Council, and this spring I've had the privilege of getting to do some international travel as part of delegations that are going to parts of the world that have been demonized by U.S. military intervention, and to see firsthand the impact of that and how it connects to our own city and the struggles that we have been through. So in late February, I had the privilege of going to Honduras, and earlier in March, I had the privilege of going to Havana in Cuba and spend about 3 days there, seeing firsthand the impact of the oil blockade and the United States intervention and targeting and bullying of Cuba over 70 years. And for me, the reason for going was, Minneapolis had just lived through something historic, something unprecedented, where we had a federal occupation of our city and our state that claimed the lives of several of our neighbors and Minnesotans and Americans. We saw, this like resistance to that type of intervention in our own city. It was during this time that I got this invitation, and it was all around, you have been a leader in our city going through this experience, and incorrectly people in our city, in our state, may believe that we are experiencing something that is historic that other people in this country or around the world may not understand. And the truth is, right, what we experienced in Operation Metro Surge was unique around what it looks like to experience militarism of our own city as Americans, but it is not unique in the context of the global experience. In the global experience, there are generations of people that have firsthand experience in resisting U.S. militarism and occupation, and that we have so much to learn from people, from revolutionaries around the world, around the global South. And my experience in Havana it could not be more accurate to that story, right? Where the real life impact of an oil blockade and of economic warfare, where death happens so slowly, and its purpose is to break down the will of the Cuban people to protect their own revolution. Something they've done for decades, but it is to break down the will to resist. That's the purpose of starving people slowly and then blaming their own government for an inability to move food into the core of cities, entirely perpetrated by the US government. But when your child is starving, when your child cannot receive cancer treatments, when your husband is dying because he cannot get dialysis treatments, that's the purpose of economic warfare. That's the purpose of an oil blockade, and it's why we have to be so opposed to it. And we have a unique role in that as Americans, when our government is the one perpetrating this exact cruelty. I think over the something that was historic about the flotilla and this humanitarian trip was the number of people that went, the crucial moment that we were in, and bringing several $1 million worth of humanitarian aid from both the U.S. and Europe and other parts of the world where people brought everything from urgent medical supplies like hypodermic needles that are in short supply and are creating massive problems, along with supplies for repairing and expanding solar panels. And I can't overstate the importance of that in a country where 30% of their energy consumption is from solar energy. In the US, it's about 3%. It's a really big deal, and they're building towards 100% energy coming from solar, so that things like an oil blockade cannot bring the country to a halting. The ability to create this type of humanitarian crisis doesn't exist in the hands of the US government in the future. That's a really big deal. So excited to talk a lot about some of the lessons learned about the Cuban healthcare system and the Cuban education system, both of which have deep connection to the Cuban Revolution. Those go hand in hand with the Cuban Revolution, and really grateful to be here with all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Aisha.
All right. So thank you so much, Aisha. And yeah, just a reminder again that we're doing the fundraiser. We have bracelets, little license plate art, maracas, and yarn flowers. All the proceeds will go directly to medical supplies that the blockade prevents from arriving to Cuba. Cuba has sent hundreds of doctors abroad to Jamaica, Venezuela, Haiti, Mexico, Italy, and many other countries. They educate thousands of doctors from all over the world, including Palestine. All of these services are either free or at a discounted rate. The blockade and sanctions make it so if products have 10% of United States origin, the U.S. must provide a special license for commerce to occur legally. Additionally, if boats dock in Cuban ports, they may not dock in a U.S. port for 6 months or more. And I'm going to start sharing my screen so that we can start sharing.
I'll grab them from here. Would you like a card for writing questions on?
Can y'all see our screen?
Yeah, can you all see the screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and then quick second, I'm just going to. And y'all can see my written introduction. Linden is my wonderful husband. Linden is the union steward at his clinic and an organizer with the Solidarity Committee on the Americas. He works in an outpatient abortion-focused clinic. He is a tireless advocate for trans, abortion, housing, healthcare, and workers' rights. He is in phase 2 of his application to the Latin American School of Medicine in Havana, Cuba. He was just in Havana with the Nuestra Convoy to Cuba. Cuba's revolution has held a strong sense of internationalism, and he aims to learn from it. If you ever visit our home, Linden may be working on more political banners or brainstorming a new way to be in direct material solidarity with oppressed peoples.
Here we go. It's nice to meet everybody. I wish I could be in person. If I didn't have COVID, or maybe perhaps if we'd handled COVID like Cuba did, where they sent around all of the doctors to people's homes and made sure that people got all the preventative care and maintained isolation, and maybe I could be with y'all. So thanks for your patience as I am here over Zoom. I am an organizer with the Solidarity Committee on the Americas of Women Against Military Madness, as Arroyo described. And I'm also a representative to Global Health Partners, which supplied a lot of the medical stuff that we brought on the plane. as well as the Elam doctors who supplied a bunch of stuff, along with personal donations from so many people in the convoy. And I just wanted to shout them out. But I also organized with Minnesota East Action Coalition, the Twin Cities Tenant Union, SEIU, Healthcare Minnesota and Iowa. And I am an applicant to the Cuban Medical School ELAM, which is a free medical school that Cuba provides to Americans. Ohio is as well. And there's a third Twin Cities applicant applying to go this fall. So one of the community members who receives really cool solidarity back from Cuba, more than I could ever provide. I went with the Code Pink delegation, which is an anti-war feminist group, as part of the Nuestra America Convoy. The Code Pink contingent was a whole bunch of people, 170 teachers, healthcare workers, organizers, students, mothers, all different kinds of people who all just wanted to go and see Cuba for ourselves and to support the Cuban people. You can see on the photo here, I made that banner, Viva Cuba y Macose Wakan Libre, because for people who are supportive within the country, they'll say Viva Cuba, and that means like lift the blockade, allow our country to thrive. Macose Wakan is the Anishinaabe name for this area. And I believe in sovereignty for indigenous peoples. So instead of saying liberate the Cubans from their own self-government, which is a common political phrase among some groups, I say Macose Wakan Libre. So Viva Cuba y Macose Wakan Libre. And that is what I went to say. What I heard the Cubans saying was Patria o Muerte, or Patria y es humanidad. Various things that show their testament that they are resilient and that they don't want to become a U.S. colony. As we talk about Cuba, I also want to bring up solidarity with Puerto Rico, which, as you can see in the bottom here with this little photo of a display of Jose Marti that I saw in an old folks' home on the trip. Cuba is very much in a place where, because of its sovereignty, so much is able to be provided to the people, like education. Like, I didn't meet anyone who didn't own their home. Like, these things that we fight for, they have blackouts and they are negatively impacted by the blockade. But they also have this resiliency. And so I just wanted to say that there and to stress that, the U.S. colony that doesn't get to vote over the elections that they are taxed around, Puerto Rico, technically a territory, they also have blackouts. And those have been going on without a blockade on the country. So this just kind of shows a little bit of the structure of the presentation here, but I wanted to start it off with that. I went to Havana, and the reason I felt like I wanted to go on the convoy in the first place is because there are so many cool organizations that were involved with this. The Freedom Flotillas to Palestine, Code Pink, Elam graduates, the Amazon Labor Union, Belly of the Beast. And I forgot to update this, I'm so sorry, but there was so many different queer organizations. Red is what it's used to say organized, but they would start off with red and then they would be like people with HIV, or men who have sex with men, or trans women, or trans men, or lesbians and bisexuals. And we got to organize a drag show with them. But there were so many different organizations we worked with to do fundraisers and to get people connected. And that's why I felt like I really wanted to go, is because there's all these other amazing people going. You can see down here an Elam graduate who is a friend of one of the local doctors here who graduated from Elam. Her She may be in the audience. Dr. Ala Lewinsky Albanese is my doctor, provides low-income health care, and also connected me with Dr. Ismael Oromo, who here is being connected with Chris Smalls. So you can just see all these awesome people. I also have I want to shout out the National Cuba Committee. Lisa on the bottom right with Medea is one of the organizers there. And I think the Massachusetts Peace Accent Coalition as well. Our plane was stocked, so stocked that we weren't even able to bring carry-ons. So we just had a personal item and a little I don't remember what they called the carry-on. And so a lot of us still with that put in medical supplies instead of clothes. I bought clothes in Cuba because of that. And you can just see all the people with are not too many bags, but are here waiting to help unload the medical stuff. People from Puerto Rico, people from Chicago, from Black Alliance for Peace. So many different folks participated in this. And it's also right at the same time as the Global Health Partners launches the neonatal supplies drive. So they actually sent some of their stuff with us as well. And you can see here, I just mentioned briefly, we're sending this medical solidarity to Cuba. Cuba also has sent a lot of medical solidarity our way. One way that I think it would be really beneficial to Americans had we not had this blockade at the time is when Cuba tried to send a whole bunch of doctors to relieve New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. They would have gotten there before the U.S.-backed relief arrived and, provided free services to the people, saved a lot of lives, especially in the Black and Creole community in New Orleans. And I just think it's important to mention that this goes both ways, as much as I talk about bringing all this awesome stuff. And then this is just a brief video of me packing up some of those supplies, some pride flags that we all signed and gave to the different queer organizations. And just look at this cat as a brief movement in the presentation. She was a little mushroom. He was very helpful in getting us packed up there. There were a bunch of cats in Cuba too. Page, it'll let me. How do I? Oh, there we go. Perfect. When we first arrived, we got to participate in a big political conference with all different kinds of people. I was especially excited to see the Cuban labor syndicates there. In Cuba, unions are a part of the government. So whenever you hear about concessions and privatizing sections of the economy, that means union jobs where people have the best, benefits and pay are becoming privatized, and that is not something I personally support, and I was really excited to hear directly from people who are doing such amazing preparations, especially as someone in medicine. I really love that they are so prepared around preventative health care and disaster relief. We earlier went to East Cuba after Code Pink sent out that call, and also went to East Cuba. We were we'll go there. And it had been hit by Hurricane Melissa. And I won't talk anymore about that visit, but I just wanted to mention that between those two trips, I didn't meet anyone who didn't own their homes. And that's in a place where, a hurricane destroyed some of the homes. So this picture here, you can see the different flags of people that were represented. One of them is from the Zone of Peace, which is a Caribbean, Mexican, broader organization of countries in the Caribbean who got together in part in opposition to the boat bombings of the fisher folk off of the coast of Venezuela and several other countries. And they were there. So were people from El Salvador, from the Catalonian, which is colonized part of Spain, sovereignty movement, from Chile, from the youth organizations of Chile, and from Puerto Rico and Palestine. Oh, as well as Ireland. I forgot to put the kneecap, the rapper's little Irish head covering there is also been hung up for right before the president spoke. And when he did speak, it was over like love between peoples and the desire to have dialogue and, peaceful and respectful relations with the United States. This is the president right there. This guy is in Black Alliance for Peace, and this individual, I believe she was part of the student movement. If you want to scan those QR codes, I have some sources and a statement from Progressive International. My notes aren't pulling up, so I can't see what I put for the other one, but I'm sure it's useful. Progressive International was one of those organizations, by the way, that comes together. And let me just go over this a little because I forgot to. We have the People's Health Movement, Cuba, Global Health Partners, then the International Association for Diplomatic Lawyers, the National Lawyers Guild, and the U.S. Peace Council that were all represented in that. Another one of the large organizers was Progressive International, an old organization that organizes across the Americas. And I want to continue this on that very next day after we got in and then had the conference at night. We started off strong in the morning by going to see the community. I went to visit a beautiful restored Jesuit convent, which was being used to provide free memory care, child care, free glasses and glasses repair. It was also a soup kitchen and a public educational resource. They stressed a lot that the people there had been given this without needing to do paperwork to get a bunch of referrals or to pay for it. And this is the area where, under the supervision of doctors, these patients who are living there will provide free child care and do cultural activities with the kids. And I'll keep it moving because I should be keeping good track of my time, but just a moment.
Qué bueno.
Es nuestra responsabilidad, ellos todos lo tienen, todo. Rosita, ¿hasta qué año trabajaste? ¿Y en qué trabajabas? 1996. ¿Y qué hacías? Explícale tu trabajo. I was a teacher. I taught English and French.
Qué bueno.
French in comics and English in Academy of Sciences.
Qué bueno.
And I'll keep moving because I know that I am taking up a lot of time here, but I just wanted to mention that these two ladies worked their whole lives in Cuba. They're residents of that neighborhood, as is the doctor that you just saw, and they were talking about how everyone is entitled to elder care. And I think it's really amazing to imagine what that would be like if we had that in the United States. Just a few more pictures of the convent. And then this is a picture of when I was giving my medical donations, as well as helping coordinate with other people to get medical donations to this doctor, Dr. Ismael Romo, who is a lovely person. And if I have more time, maybe I'd put a video of him up here, as well as to a Cuban pediatrician. When we went to Holguín, they took the EKG paper out of our bags. So, not the Cubans, the ICE, whoever searches your bags in Miami. And so I made sure to get some to them this next time. And then I wanted to mention that he's from Niger. He's going back to practice rural medicine there after learning medicine for free in Cuba. There was a lot of doctors from Africa that I met there. Chris Smalls, here with him because of the shared struggle
between African Americans and people struggling for sovereignty from within Africa. And then I just wanted to bust a few myths. This is a country where I talked with a ton of people just in the street, and they had social media, internet. They could express criticism or support of the government without anybody like being strange about it. Like this is a place that I really want to humanize. And also to bust a little bit of myth around us staying in a hotel. Because of the size of our delegation, the U.S. Department of Foreign Asset Control decided that we had to go to only 4 different places, and we picked one of the ones that they allowed for us. They were all luxury hotels, so we didn't have an option in that. And I also wanted to mention that these people that we saw, if you saw coverage of the blockade, of the convoy, and like people asking for money, that there were people who I met who had survived human trafficking attempts through organized crime, which gets a lot of its money from the U.S. So while Cuba is doing a lot to actually be the United States' biggest security partner, the Cuban people are afflicted by this problem in some instances because of money coming out of the U.S. and political situation that is created by the United States. This is just some photos of the beautiful drag event, and I could definitely say more, but I've gone over time. So thank you all.
Okay, well, we're collecting your questions. We'll do that. And also I'll put in the, okay, there's the one. This is for donations. I've got here the sites you can go to. And I don't know, somebody asked about a check. What's a good place to write a check to?
How do you get it out?
Yeah, that's what
It's to one of the organizations. It's to one of the like Global Health Partners.
Okay, do Global Health Partners, Joe.
Yeah.
And here's
And
the,
don't say Cuba.
yeah, don't say Cuba. Okay, for both of you, what is the general status of religion in Cuba? Aisha, you want to go first? Here.
General status of religion in Cuba. So I think I'll speak to kind of just what I saw. So I arrived in Cuba on Eid, and so I started my morning and Eid prayers in the morning in Miami, and then flew to Havana from there. I'm Muslim, so I'm so privileged to have gotten to spend one of the holiest days in my faith practice, in Cuba. There's approximately something like 3 million, or 300,000, sorry, added a zero for no reason. Muslims that live in Havana and in Cuba. There's a mosque that was about a 15-minute walk from the hotel we were staying at to the mosque in Cuba. It was really beautiful, one of the, more beautiful than any of the mosques that I've seen in Minnesota, period. I think the way that I really experienced people talking about faith was through asking really thoughtful, inquisitive questions. And that really connects to the impact of the education system and the literacy campaign that, you know, at this point is generations old, but you really see the impact of it when you talk to children. So I spent one of my days kind of walking to John Lennon Park, and near there are where all the embassies are, and all of the houses are so extravagant because that's where military generals used to live under the Batista regime. And they were all overthrown, and then the maids and service staff in those houses were given land rights to those houses all around this, like, you know, trendy neighborhood in Havana. And I got to spend some time talking to these young children that, you know, their ages kind of ranged from 6, 7 years old, all the way up to the oldest of the kids was 14. And they asked us a lot of really different questions, and some of them, you know, like really want to just practice their English skills. And so, you know, they're like asking us different questions, and the 14-year-old, when he walks up, just has the most thoughtful questions I've seen a 14-year-old be able to ask. My brother is 15. He could not ask such questions. Most American adults couldn't. So his questions were around, like, you know, what is life like in America? And you know, what do people do for work? And how much of your income do you spend on your housing costs as it relates to, like, how much money you make? And as we're, you know, like translating and kind of describing this to him, we mentioned something about healthcare costs, and this kid goes, healthcare costs? What's that? And I kid you not, healthcare costs, what is that? And so it's like, oh yeah, you know, you have to pay for insurance. Oh, what's insurance? It's the thing that makes it so you have the right to go to the doctor. Oh, you have to pay for the right to go to the doctor? That's it then, right? No. You have to pay for the right to go to the doctor, and then you have to pay the doctor, and then sometimes the people that you pay for the right to see the doctor don't pay for the doctor you want to see. This child was like blown away by such a concept. But, you know, he's like talking to us about things like, you know, like the relations between and the history of relations between the American government and the Cuban government, the American people and the Cuban people. These are the kinds of questions that American adults could not ask. And a 14-year-old child is asking us because of the access to education. And I say all of that to say that I did not experience a lot of, like, faith traditions beyond faith traditions as it relates to like the Jesuit community that's providing care. I saw a lot of people who expressed a lot of spirituality, expressed a lot of discontent with the world as it is, but a lot of sharp analysis that it was the fault not of some divine intervention, but of human beings making really cruel choices about how other human beings deserve to live or die. And I think that's like, I think the best way to capture the way faith shows up in day-to-day interactions.
Linden, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can just say that a few things. I'm applying through the Interreligious Foundation for Community Organizing, Pastors for Peace. And they work directly with religious organizers in the United States. They're a trusted organization that's been around since Martin Luther King Jr. and was founded by Reverend Lucius Walker. And I also saw people practicing everything from Santeria, which is like a corporation of different indigenous and African spiritual practices, to Catholicism, to Islam. We donated some solar panels to the mosque where the Palestinian doctor that we got to meet, who was being trained at Elam, went to practice. And I saw so many people using their religion for good, and it very much seemed like a religiously free society. So yeah, it was definitely something that I think if I was a spiritually grounded person, I would love to go to Cuba to share that practice in between people from different countries, as so many people on the convoy did.
which is beautiful.
I would just want to add two things. I think one of the big ways in which we see the impact of religious fundamentalism in the U.S. is through the rights of, like through the conversation of abortion access and abortion care, and then through gender affirming care. This is these are both examples, right? In like a modern society where that, and like a government that at its core cares deeply about care, providing care, whatever that means to its people. These two issues are ones that I got to spend a lot of time talking to some medical students who study at ALAM, the International Latin American Medical School. And you know, they talked, the conversation on abortion I found to be incredibly fascinating for a government that does not instill a faith upon its people, and it's not present in its medical or its like social safety net systems. So abortion is, as an example, something that is completely destigmatized, right? Like it's a question that you get asked by your doctor in the same way that you get asked, like, did you do any international travel when we go to the doctor here in the US? It's not like a, like, ooh, secret, like weird question to ask, like, did you have an abortion? That prenatal care is the best comparison for us is like the way high risk pregnancies are treated in the US is the way that all pregnancies are treated in Cuba. Abortion and the right to abortion it exists through the Constitution that guarantees the right to reproductive freedom to all people. And the way that looks is there are two kinds of illegal abortions in Cuba. The first is one that is coerced. So whether it is in particular for folks who are Catholic, if you cannot coerce your partner, your child, your grandchild, whoever you have a relationship to that is pregnant, into having or not having an abortion. And if you are found to have coerced someone into having or not having an abortion, you are prosecuted by the government as having done something illegal. That's something that in this country we can't like quite conceptualize. The second type of illegal abortion, and this one was really hard for me to conceptualize, especially, the second type of illegal abortion is one where money exchanges hands. Because the belief is if someone pays for an abortion, if someone pays for you to have an abortion, your right to reproductive freedom that belongs to you and you alone has been infringed upon. And both the person who paid for the abortion and the person who received money to give you an abortion are prosecuted by the government for having coerced you and infringed upon your right to reproductive freedom. Right? So like I think that's an important piece to lift up as like the government pays for your abortion. Nobody ever exchanges money. And if they do, that is illegal. On gender affirming care, right? That gender affirming care is something that is covered by the government. Any type of medical procedure you want to have as a part of care to affirm your gender identity is one that, without question, is paid for. It is provided to you by a government doctor, and is a part of the framework of providing care through a biopsychosocial lens, where the question a doctor always asks you is not what hurts, but rather like what's happening in your life that is causing the underlying conditions through which you are experiencing pain. So we are not putting a Band-Aid on your pain, but rather treating you as a holistic human being, and gender affirming care is a part of that biopsychosocial framework. And both of those things, right, gender affirming care and abortion being things that people just receive, that are not politicized the way they are in this country, I think can really deeply speaks to the importance of a highly educated society and a society that believes in the agency and the freedoms of all of its people.
Thanks. All right, this is
Can I have a question about what she said?
If Americans go over there, American woman goes over there and she wants an abortion from the Cuban doctors, can she get it?
It's different. I don't know how Americans go over there to receive medical care, but I think Linden may actually have an answer to this one.
I'm actually organizing around that right now. A bunch of the queer organizers are trying to help people get connected for abortion care and gender affirming care. While I haven't successfully set up all of those connections, we haven't yet, there's an organization called Levántate por Cuba that does Alzheimer's treatment for Americans going to Cuba for medical care. And you do pay for it. That money goes into the Cuban public health care system. It doesn't even exist in the United States. So thinking about it's almost a year of treatment. It's $14,000, and that includes living there. So your living expenses for almost a year. So this is something people do for other services. I know people who've gone for gender affirming care. I got top surgery. I moved to Minnesota for top surgery. I know people who went to Cuba for their top surgery. Amazing results. You don't go home from the hospital the same day. You stay and you're monitored in your recovery because they believe in from pregnant people to people recovering post surgery. There's a higher standard of that recovery. So even if our thought was in part that even if you had some parts of your care covered by your insurance, depending on what cost we end up settling with for helping people access that care through this new organization we're trying to create, people have already been going, and for many people it is cheaper than it is in the United States. I can tell you for sure that the recovery is gonna be a different thing. You're just not gonna be sent home. People who are pregnant, who are young or have a hard social situation, or they have a gestational condition, or just a condition in general pre-existing, say they have diabetes or they have gestational hypertension, those people go in a house where they don't have to work, that's publicly funded, and there's a campaign right now to keep those buildings air conditioned amidst the fuel blockade. So if you wanted to get an abortion in Cuba, you could. I couldn't facilitate it yet because you need to figure it out, but there are people who are working on getting that connection to be more of a thing. There are so many different aspects to that because it's so criminalized in the United States. At the clinic where I work, people come from all the surrounding states. They also come from Florida and Texas. So I would love to be able to tell the Floridians go to Cuba, but I think there might be some legal consequences for all of us in that. So we're looking into it. It depends on where you are. And at this time, I would go through Cuba Heal for people who are seeking medical care in Cuba from the United States. But we've also got an amazing Cuban trained doctor with us who, if you're looking for a doctor who could help you with medical care, I highly recommend her. We get her care for only $25 a visit, and she's been very respectful with us around gender affirming care. And also, I haven't personally needed it, but would be the same with abortion care because it is such a thing that's protected in Cuba, and that Cuba exports reproductive freedom to the rest of the world.
We have a question here on healthcare, kind of comparing, it's a long question. So what's happening here, of course, the system is deteriorated, but I think that Cuban healthcare system is taking some hits too right now. So if you want to talk to that.
The Cuban healthcare system certainly has taken hits as a result of the oil blockade, and that looks like a few different things. So I got to speak with someone who's a human rights lawyer and was born and raised in the U.S. and then went to Cuba in early 2020, got stranded there because of COVID, and then permanently decided to relocate. Have a child there, and her her child's father is on dialysis. So I made a reference to patients who are receiving dialysis care and what that looks like. So when you need some type of specialized care, in addition to your doctor, which if you live in the city is approximately 3 blocks away from you, no matter where you live, it is you get transported to one of the main hospitals. So one of the best hospitals and largest hospitals in Cuba is right along the shoreline in Havana, and that's where this woman's child's father was receiving his dialysis care. And the way she described the impact of the blockade on the healthcare system is one that children that are in the NICU, or any person that's in the ICU, when you don't have the power to run the hospital, those are people that are dying because there is no fuel to keep the generators running to have the specialized care that you need continue to happen. So lots and lots of people in ICUs and NICUs are dying. Another impact is for dialysis care, the filters and the specialized needles that you need. There aren't enough hypodermic needles in the country, and so people are buying those off the black market and bringing those to the hospital with them in order to prevent infection from spreading by just receiving dialysis. Dialysis patients, because they can't run the amount of equipment needed to process patients at the pace that would be required. Some patients are patients are permanently hospitalized that are receiving dialysis because their turn might come at 2:00 in the morning. So you're being transported, which is provided by the government, right? Someone comes and picks you up from your home, brings you to the hospital, brings you back home. But patients that are being unnecessarily hospitalized, all of that overburdens hospitals and medical systems, right? Where for basic types of care, when you can't provide it, there's an overburdening that happens there. For highly specialized care, an overburdening that happens there. And all of that ultimately then is about deteriorating a basic care system that people rely upon. And then there's, folks who, cancer medications are not available there right now. So there's, I met a Colombian nurse who practiced in the U.S. in the 90s in New York City at, I think it was Mount Sinai or Presbyterian, one of the big famous hospitals in New York City. And went back had visited Cuba several times throughout early parts of her career, throughout the 70s through the 90s, and then permanently moved there in the early 2000s, and is a practicing nurse there right now. And she talked about her inspiration for coming to Cuba permanently was the way that she saw the AIDS crisis, that was, and the response to that through medical systems in New York City, where she saw, just the generation of people that died as a result of the AIDS crisis in the US. When she went back to Cuba, the way that HIV and AIDS were introduced in Cuba was from soldiers that had gone to Angola in the 70s and 80s. And so military personnel that are coming back, medical brigades that are coming back having contracted this disease. And she saw the way that every patient was treated with so much care and fed highly nutritious foods every day, that within the first 5 years of introduction, the disease was completely eradicated, right? Today in the US, we see the impact of this sharp increase in HIV and AIDS cases are directly connected to unsheltered homelessness. That's how it's spreading. That's how we are experiencing an epidemic right now in this country. There are no homeless people in Cuba. Every person has a home. Your home may not have water, or your home may not have electricity, because of the blockade, but every person has a home. There's no homelessness. People live longer than they do in the US. Even without electricity, even without water, even without the ability to import basic things to maintain infrastructure. I think that like really deeply speaks to the need for this type of healthcare system. They have a lung cancer vaccine. You don't have to die from lung cancer. You don't have to die from being a smoker. We don't have that here. Yeah, thank you.
I think that was really well said, and I'll add on a little bit, but I think that Aisha Chughtai, really, you gave an amazing description of both Cuban resilience and the effect of the blockade. When we went, Dr. Olive Lewinsky-Albanese was able to connect us with a bunch of insulin. Members of my union were able to help us bring syringes and different like needles. The trans mutual aid community, the Aliveness Project actually, which is a project run by like trans people, immigrants, and it's dedicated to people with HIV who are living in Minneapolis, who are often unhoused, just as you were talking about. And we're bringing these supplies here because people can't, from these organizations that help people access it here, because it's hard to access here, and we're giving it to them, and it's being distributed in less than 24 hours. And like you can just see the difference that intervention makes, that like distribution and making things free, making sure everybody owns their home, is a huge public health concern. Also, like in terms of racial disparities in medicine in the United States. In Cuba, it's actually, even under the blockade, safer for a Black woman to give birth than it is in the United States. And I think that it's also really relevant. Like, we heard this story when we were there of overnight at the Almajeres hospital in Havana, when the blackout happened, that they had lost power to all the generators. Now, the first narrative was that when those people who were having assistance, mechanical assistance breathing, that when that electricity went out, that they died. Actually, the African doctors trained through ELAM saved all of those people. Nurses, Cuban nurses and doctors were up all night manually ventilating babies, elderly people, like just the whole hospital. And they didn't lose any patients. They're very used to and prepared for disaster and for low resources. But there is a point where like you can only manufacture so much plastic, for example, on an island the size of Tennessee. They aren't rich in oil. They aren't a mining and special mineral focused economy. They're a healthcare focused economy. And when we see the healthcare brigades come under attack, for example, in Jamaica, I had got the pleasure to briefly meet a Jamaican American ELAM graduate who then went and practiced rural gynecology, was like saving women's lives all the time in this place he was personally connected to. The U.S. threatens to like do brutal things that would impact the economy in Jamaica in terms of tariffs and restrictions on trade. If they didn't expel the doctors which are helping the most poor and remote people in Jamaica. Not only does that harm people across the world and all the countries impacted by this, but it also was like it's the center of the Cuban economy is their professionals who go abroad for a few years and then come back, and they give a portion of their income to the Cuban government, and they got free education. You know, they are provided for in their living situation, and they're still making more than most Cubans. So we pay taxes. They are doing essentially a similar thing. And that the attacks on those programs, as well as the attacks through the energy blockade, have really profoundly impacted the Cuban medical system, because like if you don't have insulin, you don't have insulin. Like you can only do so much through like medical professionals, and no matter how competent they are, being like really well trained. Unfortunately, the blockade is coming for the medications, for the like raw materials, and that's really why we went there, because that is a collective punishment. It's a war crime. It's also an act of war, and it's not something that the American people want to attack the Cuban healthcare system. I don't think anyone that any of us knows that wakes up in the morning is like, gosh, I wish the Cuban healthcare system was worse. So it's just not a concern that comes from the U.S. people, and it is really profoundly impacting Cubans and people around the world.
We have one more here. A little more of a political question. What concession, well, it's all political, what concession might Cuba make in exchange for lifting of the blockade? And how much, talk about the Chinese supplying solar panels, where that's at. And
Yeah, so some of the materials that are needed for solar panels are produced within Cuba. The introduction of solar into the Cuban energy system was as a result of materials provided by China. There's actually, like, when you walk around Havana, you see vehicles and just things that you know, just based on what people will tell you. You know, this is something that came from China. This is something that came from Russia. This is, like, you know, and vehicles are super, super old. And have been maintained by parts that were then manufactured in Cuba. So, you know, I think the way I want to address, you know, what type of concessions the Cuban government might make in return for lifting the blockade. I think one of the myths that's often told about the Cuban people and the Cuban government is you know, this like repression that happens where people are not allowed to dissent without incarceration or other types of political consequences, and that certainly did not hold to be true in my experience. And this anecdote I'd heard on my first day there, I really saw in real time, right? Between two Cubans, there are 7 opinions on any given issue, and I think something that is important for us to hold as Americans all the time is, like, our role is to fight the blockade. Our role is to oppose any form of intervention, collective punishment, economic warfare, actual warfare, whatever it may be that is perpetrated by the US government or its allies onto the Cuban people. What the Cuban people choose to do in terms of the concessions they make as they're negotiating for the right to live for their peoples, what the Cuban people do in terms of how they choose to set up their government or who their leaders are, that's their choice. That's what we mean when we say the right to self-determination. It is not on us to get to offer criticism or judgment on any concession the Cuban government chooses to make to lift the blockade. It is on us to oppose the blockade and to fight for it to be lifted as U.S. citizens, as Americans. I don't know what concessions they may be considering. Frankly, I don't care. That's between the Cuban government and their constituents, their people. On us as U.S. citizens and as Americans, it's on us to fight for the lifting of the blockade, to fight against collective punishment, to fight against economic warfare on the Cuban people.
And I think it's worth noting that the concessions that have been made in the past, because there have been a lot of concessions made, the Cubans always stress, we are open to talking. We've never not been open to talking. We just want to be treated as a sovereign nation. We don't want to be a colony. We don't want to be Epstein Island #2, where wealthy Americans can come and abuse Cuban people. And that was released. That was part of the release of the Epstein documents. They have explicit discussion of that. when I remember the quote was like something along the lines of like, when Fidel came to Havana, I canceled my flight. It's like, I don't really want the Cuban people, aren't a monolith, and that's for sure. But I personally, and every Cuban I talk to, they don't want Cuba to be, colonized by the United States. So worth noting that, because it is, as Aisha was saying, something we need to oppose, and that any concessions that the Cubans make, they're making strategically with a gun to their head, essentially, to the head of all these babies and incubators. And that's wrong. And they shouldn't have to make that kind of a decision, because the blockade is violation of international law. After coercing a bunch of countries during Trump's reign of trying to make the Monroe Doctrine come back and say that in order to, prevent people from their sovereign right to trade between nations and choosing to trade with China instead of the U.S., where we get the right to colonize and force places to kick out Cuban doctors, force places to not join BRICS, force places to do all this stuff. And it's not even successful, but it's also blatantly illegal. And I saw so much international solidarity. 89% of the UN, even after this latest round of particularly intense aggressions against Cuba, voted against the blockade. The U.S. is alone on the stage in terms of supporting the blockade. And those private markets that we hear about people buying syringes from to go to their apartments, those people who, I spoke with someone who had lost a leg, who had seen his family member eaten by sharks, trying to be trafficked to Florida, where there is a concentration camp for undocumented people in the Everglades, which our neighbors are currently in, whose identities have been lost in the system, and we can't retrieve them. There's a pending and current crisis where we have, an insane number of our neighbors in indefinite detention with conditions that often don't include healthcare, but also don't even often include a bed and safe drinking water, right to a lawyer, all of those things. They're coming because there's an information war that the U.S. is doing, because even though Cubans, they have freedom of access to the internet, they're on social media, they're seeing various things, and they're certainly not, I wouldn't say they've lost the information war, but there are Cubans who think that, if I go to this country with, and understandably, a 1 to 500 exchange rate, I can send money back to my family, or I will just have a better life. And those people are, and those markets, the black market, those things are sustained by the United States. Historically, the U.S. has collaborated with organized crime to launder money and do human trafficking and all different kinds of things through those organizations. That's the opposition, and those are the concessions that are made. You have a good unionized job, doing whatever you're doing in the aquaponic growing lettuce, and then the U.S. strengthens sanctions against Cuba or a blockade. We've had the Helms-Burton Act justifying sanctions against Cuba. It was passed right before Operation Cyclone, the 20-year imperialist counterterrorism war on Afghanistan that cost 100,000 lives, at least. That's all that stuff. When you hear about those concessions, the power is going to the, in my opinion, the most evil systems that you can imagine. These same organizations that are responsible for so much collective trauma among people trying to escape the conditions that were created by the blockade, then having to wrap their lives up in this set of systems which is able to get them into the United States or to get them stuff from the United States. And it's very criminal. I hope that any concessions that the Cuban government makes, that we have supported them to such an extent that they're as little as they can, make them, because they're calling them concessions almost feels wrong, but it is the right word. because they're just made under such ridiculous circumstances, and the actual power isn't going like, oh, to like small businesses like we're thinking. I mean, some of it does that, but the Cuban government actually supports small businesses. I would imagine it'd be a lot easier to be a small business owner on Arcade Street, which has been closed for like 8 months out of the year for the last 2 years, and I live right off Arcade Street in St. Paul. If you had some representation in your government, some public funding, and some like free education before you started your business, to go do all those things, some say over public policy around the closing down the road for two years, about like there's just so many things where I would say in terms of concessions, I would imagine they would continue to take union jobs and make them part of that black market system. That's an imperfect understanding of it, I'm sure, but from the many people that I spoke with, that is the understanding I have. And I'll also mention that when we were in Holguin, we saw an oxygen processing plant that was provided entirely by China to Cuba. And one of the Cuban people made a joke with me. He asked, "Oh, is that guy American?" And when he heard yes, he was like, "It's a spy plant." And it's like, it's obviously not. It's just an oxygen processing plant. And China does not want to have proxy wars with the United States in every single country that the U.S. wants to steal oil from. But that doesn't mean that China has stopped extending solidarity on the international stage. And it doesn't mean that China has stopped extending material solidarity. And I think that destigmatizing their relationship with China would only be helpful for Cuba. So that's why I bring that up. It's a good questions we're getting.
Well, I think we have taken enough of your time. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to say?
Okay, I'm gonna actually end with like a sweet anecdote about the universality of meme culture. So, you know, as Linden mentioned, like Cubans have access to social media and the internet. They built it on their own, and so internet culture among young people is actually quite similar to the way the internet was in like 2015 and social media was in 2015. So that's not the point. The point is, I want to go back to John Lennon Park, which was named after John Lennon. We inquired about this for hours, and by the end, what we learned was it was named after John Lennon because of the popularity of the song Imagine, not because like John Lennon ever went to Havana or performed there. Like, it's just not, it was funny. Anyway, talking to these kids, right? And what they're like practicing their English, as I mentioned earlier. And this kid is like saying this word, and the one person with us who is the most fluent in speaking Cuban Spanish is like, I don't know what this word means. And like, he kind of tries to describe it a few different times. We don't make much progress. Finally, this guy who we're with pulls out his phone and like is like, can you please type this word in this dictionary? So let's like find out what it means. It was shark. The kid was asking, do you have sharks in America? Right? And so when we say shark, the youngest of them goes, baby shark. Right? And like, they know the Cuban children know baby shark. And then we like, we're talking because we're like, oh wow, why do they know baby shark? I wonder if they know other like, you know, common popular culture memes and things like that from here. So he turns around, he goes, 6, 7, 6, 7, and the kids in unison scream 6, 7. And so that's like the universality of like the heavy moments and the really, really heavy things about the impact of collective punishment, about the impact of the oil blockade. And then like one of the sweetest memories for me in reflecting on that time will always be baby shark and 6, 7, you know, like it's really sweet. And Cuban children and American children are not that different from each other. Thank you.